right, welcome to the new members of the committee. It'll be a pleasure to work with you guys. I know Katie through the CEF and a few other town endeavors, but Chris, I'm not familiar with you. If you would like to give us a little download on you, that'd be great.
Sure. Sorry, the voice is a little faint there. Did you suggest that I talk? I couldn't hear.
Me? Great.
I couldn't hear you whether I've been called on or not.
Yeah, Susan
Yes.
had invited you just to introduce yourself.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
I'm Chris Peisch. Hello to everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to serve on the committee. Corey, background or what? How much do you want to be bored by here? I mean, it depends on how much time people have.
Give us the 45 seconds.
45 seconds. Okay. Born in Burlington, Vermont. Educated in New England. Ended up spending a large part of my career in Europe, London, and then Frankfurt. Moved to Cohasset in 2015. Grown children, so we don't have children that have gone through the school system there, and we're relative newcomers. We're transplants, and this was suggested to me by Tim Davis, and I'm honored to be welcome to the committee. I'm trying to get a little bit more involved in the town, and this is my first step.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Or you all may decide it's my final step too.
No, unfortunately, once you step into these waters, you're never allowed out. So,
So for and Chris, what we do in first of every meeting is we have to do a roll call where we all have to say that we're here. So we'll do that now, Susan, before we get into topics.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. Okay. You want to call it?
Sure. I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's October 16th. Present in the meeting by roll call are Susan Franklin.
Corey Evans.
present Katie Dugan.
Ralph Dormitzer present.
Chris Peisch.
Awesome. And Chris, this is Michelle Leary. She is the assistant town manager, and she's I guess our handler, if you will. she's in charge of bringing us really going through a lot of the filtration within the works of town, bringing us stuff as it's ready to go. So she's going to be the primary point for pretty much everything we talk about. So you'll see a lot of Michelle going forward.
Okay, great.
Okay. So I guess to start off, we'll talk a little bit about the change. The obvious big change in the room is Brian Host is no longer a member of the committee, and we need to reorganize ourselves. I've been asked to serve as chair, and we can discuss that for a little bit, whether people are comfortable.
She's been fed, not peed, so careful. Oh, excellent. Backyard then.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
Katie, you weren't muted.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay.
Just transacting with my husband. Sorry, we've got passing ships here in from New York.
So I'm sorry to interrupt, but Brian Host is on. Would we
Oh,
like
yes.
to admit him so he can,
Sure.
Yes.
Great.
Sure.
Corey,
I
you unsure on that?
I just talked to Brian a few minutes ago. He said, he said, don't bring me on unless I'm needed.
Oh,
so
okay. We can put him back
it's
out.
up to him.
Okay. Brian, you're in, but we're going to pretend you're not here unless you want to be here.
Well, listen,
Well,
let me
actually,
nominate.
we're just talking about the reorganization of the committee.
Yeah, let me nominate Susan Franklin to be chair of the committee.
I will second that motion. Yep.
Vote.
I
All
guess
those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Everybody.
For moving down the roster, I'd love to nominate Corey Evans for vice chair.
Second that.
Aye.
Okay. Roll call.
I, Katie Dugan.
Aye, Chris Peich.
Our dormants are aye.
Excellent.
Do we
We
have to-
typically,
Yeah.
yeah, so we don't, on the secretary role, it's not a requirement, but we do have somebody, an external resource, who can do minutes for us. So we don't necessarily need to nominate a secretary unless we feel it's strictly, we want to, but we don't need to do the minutes. If we don't, we can outsource those.
Fine with that. Is that resource is still available to us, Michelle? Excellent.
She is, yes. If you wanted a secretary just to check the minutes that are done, you can do that if someone's willing to do that. But other than that, I don't think you need one.
I think Susan and I can probably handle that.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, so we wanted to talk a little bit about our committee and some of its accomplishments that we've experienced over the last few years. A few of us have been on the committee for quite a while, Ralph and I. Corey joined was it last year, Corey, or the year before?
This will be my second cycle, so yeah, a year and a half. Yeah.
Yeah, and Francine, who's not here tonight, has also served multiple terms on the committee as well. And so we wanted to just go over a little bit some of the accomplishments and that we've had and some of the sort of practices that we want to have as a committee and how we want to hold our meetings and take on responsibilities, share information, and all that type of stuff. So Corey, feel free to jump in at any time. But what makes a capital budget committee sessions successful are obviously the information that we have available to us. So we've spent a lot of time making strides with the town, and Michelle has been extremely important in this, in making sure that we have the materials that we need in order to effectively discuss the requests that are being brought before us. And we try also to talk about those things, not just individually, but holistically as a town. So, we go through the process of inviting the necessary people to the table to discuss their proposals. That may also involve ancillary people to come to the meeting to provide specific details about maybe the equipment or the technology that is being requested. And then we go through that process, and then technically in the past we've done it two ways, but we either hear it all and then vote, or vote on a couple things here and there along the way. But I think as a committee we wanted to talk about maybe formalizing that a little more and potentially hearing everything before voting. So that's something we can further discuss. But in terms of some of the other things that I feel that we've accomplished as a group, I think that the rapport amongst the committees, we've worked very hard to make sure that we communicate with other committees, that we don't just live in a little vacuum here. We do have joint meetings with advisory from time to time, and the select board as well. We try to understand the overall mission of the town. The select board did outline that pretty well in the last couple of years. They had their goals, and we tried to align, understand the goals that they were working towards and how we can do our jobs, best to serve the town and keep those goals, as sort of a guidepost. And I think that we've also spent a lot of time talking about discipline, fiscal discipline, with the town generally, and also amongst the different departments. Really making sure that they're asking for things that they need, that they're utilizing the funds that they receive from us, and that they are providing information that's not just static, but is part of a 10-year, it historically has been a 10-year look, a 10-year plan. So that's basically all I wanted to, impart. Corey, did you want to add anything specifically?
I think that's yeah, a good outline of what we're looking for. On the first thing, which is just establishing kind of basic operating procedures for us, which is, I do agree that hearing everything first, and then we can go through and take a lay of the land and figure out where we can punt or whatever. That makes a lot of sense versus trying to make decisions and then following up and finding weeks later that we made the wrong one or one that was not quite fully thought out. The only thing that I would also add is looking, trying to really have a good look back on what we've approved and what status is it in. You know, because there are from time to time when things go over budget, but if they come in under budget, I want to encourage that reporting to occur. That way we can say, hey, if you know there's $20,000 saved on this project, let's be sure that it accelerates your next project. I want to have us, I don't want to say reward that behavior, but encourage that behavior. That way people don't feel like they need to kind of hoard stuff. And I, you know, that's one thing which I think, especially, and Chris, since you're new, a lot of the stuff that you know Susan talked about were things that the committee was doing really well before COVID. COVID really set, you know, because it was so disruptive. There's a lot of stuff that I think we're rebuilding as just kind of good practice and procedure. So we know where we need to get to, and you know, looking back and ensuring that things come in on budget, and if they come in under budget, we are you know willing and able to execute on the next thing. I think would be huge too. So, and then finally, part of this is also instead of having the whole committee meet all the time on kind of everything in the nitty gritty, we typically will try to pair up to do liaisons. So two people will meet with schools about their requests, two people will meet with facilities, that sort of thing. And I'd like to see us really lean on that. That way, when things come to the committee, they've been through a lot of the intro questions, and there's at least two members of the board that are really intricately knowledgeable about what the request is, and it's confident that it's the right time for it to come forward. So I'd like to have us really lean on that. And the other benefit of that is it makes these meetings a little shorter. I do think that really after 90 minutes, we all get tired, and we no longer make the best decisions. So if we can do our work, you know, as we go, but then in the meetings really be tight, I think that'd really serve us well.
Right. Katie?
Just a quick question about the, you know, fiscally conservative, fiscally appropriate. Has there been a practice in the past of looking at the appropriations and seeing how much are spent? I know when we were working on CEF together, one of the big things we did was go back grant by grant. We granted $50,000, only $45,000 was spent, and we were able to sort of accumulate, you know, a lot of funds that we could repurpose it then to either new projects. So it doesn't have to stay in the fund that was appropriated if it's given back to capital to reappropriate. So I don't know when the last time this committee has gone through that process, but it's sort of the perfect time as we sort of go, the year's closed out, to look at that and sort of go through and figure out like how much could come back to the committee before we get into the nitty gritty of annual town meeting.
Well, we used to do that definitely in the meetings, Ralph. You recall that, right? With Sam, he was very meticulous about doing that. But then I think Michelle, the town started coming to us, telling us that those appropriations that were still available. And we kind of got off that, but I think we want to get back on,
Sure.
you know, it more directly.
Yeah, I would hope that at year end, you know, Don and his team, I know the team is a little bit fractured right now, but it's something that year end they would have to go through anyway. So it's sort of top of mind. So to the extent we can get Don in to have that conversation, I think that would be ideal way to start.
Yeah, let me add in here that we always did repurpose the money. It would be part of the pool of money we had available. So we would have a pool of money, which is what the town allocated to us. And then second, we would have what was deducted because in fact, what the debt obligation that we incurred was, and then we would have the repurposed money. So there were really three ways to look at this, or three pieces.
Yep.
And I know that Corey has already had a conversation with Don about providing us some information that, you know, we usually get every year, but we want to ask for it all at once and really start the process off well informed as we go forward into this cycle.
And for Chris, Don Pyatt is the gentleman we're speaking of. He was the financial director of the town a few years ago. He went to the private sector, but the town still uses him as a consultant. So he's a great resource for kind of that upload of how this whole thing works, where we are, what are the policies, that sort of thing. So we should be able to see him, I think, next week. If we can all have a meeting next week and we find it appropriate, he's available to us to kind of give us some of that technical knowledge.
Mhm.
Don't we have a fixed number already, don't we? That was actually published in the warrant. So that we have something like 1,990,000, some number like that. And we have a debt we have to cover of about 560. Those numbers are well known. I believe those are correct. And so we really want to have those as sort of lay out in front of us, and so we can see what those things are.
Mhm.
And we're also, Ralph, we're expecting a 2.5% increase in the stabilization fund funding, and then there is a debt roll off that's coming up, and so I want to get those numbers back in my head because as we go forward, and what's nice, and again, just since Chris is new on this, what we're preparing for in this round is special town meeting, which isn't kind of our big bucket. It's really just all the emergency stuff. It's classically understood as stuff that can't wait till the spring. And for some reason couldn't get done a few months ago. So this should be a very light lift. And so it's a good time to kind of think about that stuff because we're not really trying to fit, $2 million of requests into $1 million fund. So, but that's getting that background will be great.
The other thing I would add here is it would really be helpful because in the past we had a good 10-year lookout. And I'm not sure we have that anymore. We need to have that 10-year lookout, not just the current year. So that's the other piece of data.
Yeah.
So I did work on that spreadsheet for you, and I did there is a deadline for departments to get me their 10-year budget cycle request for, I think I have it on 10/29, so you'll see it soon thereafter. Something that Susan mentioned that was interesting is the liaison appointments, or maybe Corey, you had mentioned it. Can we get those sooner than later? So they start at the beginning of the process, because I feel like oftentimes we hear some of the requests and then we assign, whereas if we assign right off the bat, then maybe some collaboration can happen before the requests even come in. And as we know, the schools is a heavy lift, typically, and DPW or facilities has become a heavier lift lately. So maybe special attention to those.
I agree. I think we should get that done as soon as possible.
And I do think that there's an opportunity with the schools with a new superintendent to sort of start afresh and establish, as you were saying, a rapport, a relationship before we get into sort of the heat of the cycle, which would be good. And I know that in the past, some of those finance subcommittee meetings have been a great way to do it, that sort of a little bit more relaxed, but also focused on the nuts and bolts of the finances and less, not as hard to get on the agenda as it is sometimes is with the broader school committee. So maybe there's a way to establish those liaisons and then reach out to meet at a subcommittee or a subcommittee meeting to sort of start those conversations.
Yeah, over the past couple of cycles, Katie, the school has actually invited us to a presentation that they put together. For us. But I have not met the new superintendent yet. But I think it would be a good idea to have an introduction with her. So we don't just get the same sort of approach. Maybe she has a new way of showing us the things that, the way that she wants to look at the world. The other approach was kind of like a long list that the parts just kept staying on the list for a very long time, and they're getting a little stale. So yeah, I think it would be great for one of us. I don't know who wants to take that role who wants to be the school liaison, but we should probably get that one going as soon as possible, even though Michelle, would you know if that's something that's going to come up for special, or are they outside special right now?
The school is not asking for anything for special at the present time. However, facilities is asking for something on behalf of the schools, which is the fire alarm system. So you funded the engineering study for that. The engineering study has concluded. Now we're ready to put it out to bid. So they're looking for the funding for that. So while it's not a school request, it's a facilities request, but I think the new superintendent would like to be involved in all of these things. So I think it would be important to, bring her in when we talk about that.
Okay.
And I think for, in some cycles, you won't need a liaison for everything, but I think having two people connected to the schools at all times is wonderful because actually on this Monday's meeting, the school did have, they're starting to build their draft FY26 capital request already. So having ears to the ground on that process, that way we are, in the growth phase, not in the backwards phase would be super useful. I would love to see obviously Katie, you were CEF and school committee, you've got a lot of this stuff probably still in your head fairly fresh. If this is something that you're willing to, partner up on, I'm happy to do it as well. Susan, I don't know if you're interested in doing that as well, but I think, between us three, we can carve that up either too. And Ralph, I don't know if the schools are kind of where your brain's at, but I got the sensation previously, not so much. So that's kind of my feedback on that.
Well, I'd be glad to take on either facilities or DPW or both of them. So I'm perfectly happy with this. Yeah, sure.
I'd be happy to pair up with somebody on schools, for sure. I do have some relatively healed scars from filling out, I actually dug out my bus form. It was 13 pages, last submitted in 2019 with appendixes A through D. So I have some knowledge there. I'd be happy to sort of get back up to speed and start a relationship again. So I'd be happy with whoever else wants to partner on schools.
I have two kids in the school system, so I'm both, I've got interest, but also if the committee feels like that's I'm too, deep in because of that, I'm happy to not do it. But Sarah, the new superintendent, is actually my neighbor as well. So I've got an offline, connection with her as well, which I'm happy to leverage. So.
I don't see a conflict there, Corey, but.
Okay. This one right here, this
conflict
conflict right here.
Right, so Corey, Katie, might as well knock this down. Schools, Ralph, facilities, DPW. Chris, do you have an interest in a particular area? We have public safety, we have library, we have IT.
Oh golly, I'd be open to suggestions on that. I don't have a view on particular area.
Ralph, you're muted again.
IT is one we need to cover very well. Typically, they come in with some very significant requests for funding. So it's helpful if somebody is pretty familiar with the, routers and switches and technology in general. Take that one on. I don't know if you could, Chris, or not.
No, actually, I consider myself uniquely unqualified for that role because even the things that are mundane for you all, getting onto a Zoom are it's all hands on deck for me. My IT skills are very limited.
Ralph, I'd recommend you and I take that on because I did 8 years in network operations, and you come from that background as well, so you can speak the language. So if that's okay with you, I mean, I'd love to do that again. And I know Ron, and again, as I said, I speak the language, which is an odd one. So
okay, that works for me. Yep.
Okay, so Chris, there's elder affairs, there's library, there's harbor.
Public safety? No.
Public safety, which is
outside of the fire study, what else do we have coming down the pike? Because if there's something that's something that's coming down the pike that's a lighter lift, it'd be a good intro for Chris.
Yeah, so police does have a light lift. Chief Quigley asked if we speak about it in executive session because it is a safety matter. But it is a light lift, and I think it would be a good introduction to our public safety folks if Chris was willing to take that on.
I am happy to do it.
And I think there's a bunch of nice reoccurring requests that come up at annual town meeting for public safety, which will introduce Chris to sort of how some of those are handled in terms of how we think about replacement cycles on that front too.
Yeah, so Chris, I've been a liaison for public safety in the past, and I'm happy to do it with you.
I will need some coaching. I'd be happy to do that.
Okay. So who are we missing, Francine? Elder Affairs, Library, Harbor. I don't have the spreadsheet open to see all the departments.
I'm happy to take Elder Affairs. I did that for the schools. So I'm pretty familiar with what their requests have been in the past. I know there was an AC issue, but I don't know if that's been funded or not.
It was, yeah.
It was funded.
So it'll most likely be a pretty light cycle theoretically.
All right, so do we want to leave the last two that I have sketched here, which is library and harbor master for potentially Francine to?
We also have recreation,
Oh, recreation, that's the
Yeah.
one.
and then don't forget water and sewer. Sorry.
Not it. Sorry.
Is that one of these? No.
Yeah, sorry, whatever the motion is.
God, I know unfortunately too much about, I don't know much about water. I know more than I want to ever know about sewer.
Yeah, I think if Katie and I got sewer, I think we'd get kicked out. So maybe not so much.
Ralph, do you want to partner on DPW and facilities?
I'd be delighted to. I'd be delighted to,
Nice.
sure.
I'd love to do that just because I haven't had a chance to sort of listen in on a bunch of those conversations in a while. So if you and I could partner on that, that'd be great.
That'd be terrific, sure. Great for me, yep. Because that kind
We
of,
also-
the load gets kind of great. Between IT and facilities and DPW, that's a, that's a pretty heavy lift. That's a lot of stuff going on there, so, yeah.
Yeah.
We also have CPC and the ongoing town hall conversation. I mean, that could go under facilities, but it's kind of its own. It's almost its own Godzilla at this point.
Do we know if we got much IT stuff coming down? I don't really remember if we got a lot, do we? Michelle? We do, okay.
For special?
No,
or for annual?
not for special. For annual, I think
Okay.
you're gonna see a substantial amount of requests for IT. I think the library is gonna be a very important topic to be covered by capital this year, mostly for IT requests. So I think we just assigned Francine to the library. I think having someone else on library with her would be very helpful. So if anyone's willing to take that on, I think that'd be great. Corey, I don't think it should be you. For many reasons.
Full disclosure, my wife is a librarian at the Cohasset Library, so that is one I will not. The kids I'll cross, but I won't cross for that.
What involves money in, not out.
Ralph, would you be willing to do since you're in IT, would you be willing to be a co-liaison to Francine for the library?
Yeah, sure, why not? Just add them on there. You know, there is a limit, but anyhow.
All right, that will be it. That's the limit.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay.
So I guess I can pick up recreation potentially. Maybe Francine will want to join me on that. I have been on the town hall discussion group over the summer. So I'm pretty aware of what's going on there. I can continue to report on that.
Chris, do you want to join Francine on rec? I mean, it's an
Yes. Yeah,
easy to understand one. Okay.
I was just going to say you all should throw the new guy under the bus here with whatever you've got left. I'm in learning mode.
Water, sewer?
All right, so if Chris is going to do rec with Francine, then
That might
Not really my will.
That's not
really
a
my
level
will.
playing field, Katie.
I have never been a liaison for water and sewer, but you know.
Those are not a heavy lift
Yeah,
usually.
because
Theoretically it's
No, they're not.
theoretically self-funding and they
Yeah.
theoretically have vetted their own, so it's more of a sanity check than anything
Right.
else. We joke It's like,
I talk to members of both boards fairly frequently, so I'm happy to just do it because I'll do that in my normal course anyway.
Okay. Thanks,
So
Cory.
Cory, you want water sewer?
Yeah, but I would then we have CPC and just like Ralph said, I'm done. So
All right, well then, I'll take CPC.
great.
All right.
And Chris, CPC is the Community Preservation Commission. They are in Massachusetts. I don't know how much familiar. My apologies if I'm explaining stuff you already know. There's basically a part of our tax revenue gets carved out for the purposes of recreation, conservation. What's the last one?
Probably
Affordable housing.
affordable
Yeah,
housing.
those are the three things. So it's basically a separate bucket of money, which is designed to not be used for things like school buses or, plow trucks. Like it's designed for community improvement. And there's a separate board that makes recommendations for those things. We typically defer to that board, and because they're the ones that are kind of managing it. We kind of more have an oversight of that, and then it all goes to town meeting. But that's kind of the interplay with what CPC is. So that's
So-
playgrounds and stuff like that.
Yeah, so Chris, if you have time, and you'd like to just be a co-liaison with Susan to CPC, I think you could kind of learn and see how that one works as well.
I'd be happy to do that too.
Great.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we have all the
Very good.
assignments. I have them all down, so I'll send them out. I included them on the 10-year capital plan. So next to every category, the liaison name appears.
Excellent. Want to jump into special requests, Susan? This is other stuff we want to talk about.
can I just ask one question before we move out of process? Just in terms of transmitting information and timelines, in terms of how you guys handle that. I mean, I typically have been on committees that have done it either, via email, via OneDrive, and then hard copy packets. I'm agnostic, so whatever works. My biggest thing is just knowing that by, 2 days before the meeting, basically the packet is set, so I can go in and look at it. And yes, there will be times when new stuff has to be submitted later. That's fine. I just want to know what you guys have done in the past and how people want to work that way.
Yeah, well, for quite a few sessions now, we've been working through OneDrive, and I know that Ralph, you were having some trouble with OneDrive. Are you all set now?
I get in perfectly well. I'm not
Mike
sure
had
that
trouble,
people see
yeah.
everything, but anyway, yeah, I can get into OneDrive. That's not a big deal. I use it all the time myself. So
Yeah. Yeah, I found it very useful to have everything electronically available that way.
sure.
Yep.
And
Okay.
just-
And we can just have like a new folder for every meeting where we have agenda and all the topics, and it's just, hey, you just go into the main capital folder, you open up October 16th, and then we've got everything there. That makes my life easier, juggling a bunch of stuff at the same time. Keeping track of emails and back and forth what the most recent version is, I find an impossible task. So
Yeah.
And
yeah,
then
that's
just-
a good idea to do it by meeting.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
we
so
haven't-
everyone's
we haven't
aware,
done
I
that
did
one,
ask
so-
Ron to grant everyone access to the capital budget folder on the OneDrive.
Okay.
Chris, they are setting up an email for you. So as soon as we receive that, we'll make sure you get the information so you can log in and make sure that it works for you, because sometimes we have some little kinks we have to work out, but we'll make sure that you get your email address. Katie, you already have a town email address, so you're getting access to the folder, so that you should be okay. If
Yep.
anyone has any challenges, though, reach out to me and I'll be able to navigate it through our IT department and get it rectified pretty quickly.
Michelle, I think the issue usually is permissions
Yeah.
that Ron has got to make sure the permissions are there and we can get in, but not necessarily get to where we need to get to. So,
Exactly. And I think that's the exercise he's going through right now.
okay.
Awesome.
So
Okay.
we did want to talk a little bit, and Kid, you kind of highlighted it, about making sure that the information is available in advance of the meeting, because sometimes it's kind of a race to the finish line. Things are flying in 5 minutes before the meeting. So we would like to institute something similar where we have the details in 48 hours in advance would be absolutely great.
Okay. That's
We can
48 hours in
work towards
advance.
that.
Easy enough.
Okay, do we want to talk a little bit about meeting times? Do you guys like this time? 6 o'clock, is that a good time?
A little bit early for me because of these two. They're typically in bed now. I put them in bed around 6:45. So if we have a 7 o'clock, that always worked for me really well with select board. If that'd be my preference, flexible, but that's my preference.
A little bit later for me works. Anything after 6:30, you could see my transition happening real time between dog and dinner for a hungry teenager.
Right.
And what about days of the week? I think we sort of happened to fall on this day because we wanted to do it earlier, but last year we were Mondays. How do people feel about Monday? Michelle?
I think we should avoid Tuesdays and Wednesdays only because Tuesdays are select board and Wednesdays are advisory. So if there's a time that you want to go to advisory, it would have to be a joint meeting. So if everyone's available on Mondays, I think that would work better.
Michelle, I like Mondays as well. My only worry is if it works against us with trying to get the information you need, because if it's, Friday is always kind of a mess of a day, and Monday everyone's kind of playing with the catch-up handbook. So really it's like that would mean people would have to kind of have their stuff ready like, Thursday or Wednesday before things kind of get crazy. So, I want Mondays. I just want to be sure we're also, we're not setting ourselves up for failure when it comes to getting information from the town departments because of the days of the week.
Right. I think if you decide Mondays are the night, I think I need to send an email to all department heads and reset the tone. The information has to be 48 hours in advance or you won't be you'll be removed from the agenda, and just, put some language around it so everyone understands this new expectations.
And that basically means Thursday for them, right? Because we need it. If it's 48 hours, then that's Saturday, and you don't leave it till Friday because Friday's a shorter day. And if
Right.
you don't get it Friday, then we don't want to see it Monday. So,
Exactly.
okay.
Yeah.
Mondays work fine for me. And again, I'm kind of agnostic on a day of the week. And I feel like Francine in the past has been the one that's needed a little bit more flexibility. So again, if we want to set a day of the week, but if it lands out decreasing attendance in terms of running into problems in the future, I would say flexibility is always okay with me.
Yeah.
I'm
I
flexible
hear
and
you.
Mondays are fine for me.
I hear you, Katie. It's just harder to get the departments to adopt the criteria for getting us materials if the day's moving. I think it's easier
Discipline.
if we
Yeah.
set a date. So Monday's okay for everybody?
Yes, indeed.
Yep.
Okay, Monday it is. Monday at 7?
7.
Great.
And would you like to start that this month? Because I'll post tomorrow if you want to start Monday. So Susan, will you send me an agenda on a Wednesday for me to post on Thursday for a Monday meeting?
Or, obviously I'm gonna have to look to you to find out who's available, we'll have to work together.
I can
first, anyway.
I'll reach out to Don to see if he's available on Monday instead, and that can, if anything, we'll just have that topic. And in case we don't have anything more from the department heads, we can just do a quick 45 half hour with Don and then get back to our lives.
I have the requests ready for Monday. I put them together
Okay.
today. So
Okay.
I have the police request, which we will have to do an executive session. I do have a request from fire that falls just shy of the capital threshold, but you'll understand why we're seeing it. This facilities team will be ready to discuss the fire alarm system at the Cohasset Middle High School. And let me see what else is on here.
And just background, Chris, all of our meetings are publicly available, recorded, posted online, except for if we have an executive session. There's only a few small carve-outs where we can have a meeting in private that isn't on the record. And if it's safety related, that's one of them. So when Michelle says executive session, it's a meeting that we have that's not recorded or broadcast.
Okay.
And then the final item that I have here is a walk-in cooler request for Elder Affairs. So those are the requests for special. I'm still working with Nick to figure out if I can take that off. So, but those are the only requests we're gonna hear, and they're all available. We have the information.
We can hear them on Monday.
You can hear them on Monday.
Do we have any sense of free cash yet, or plans for free cash? Okay.
We won't have a well, we have a sense for it, but we won't have an actual certified free cash number until after the warrant's printed in November.
Okay, well, because, yeah, and just on the town hall discussion, if there's a plan to carve some money out or something like that. Sorry, Katie, my apologies.
I mean, there's a certified free cash flow, and then there's the free cash flow that's pretty much finalized. I mean, let's be clear, they closed the books on June 30th. They did not.
So Katie, because we were in transition of finance directors and accountants,
Yeah,
we're working with a consultant firm right now to make sure 24 is closed. The reconciliations have just happened last week, and I think they're working towards a number within the next 2 weeks, which would be their number, obviously not the certified number.
am I allowed to express shock and dismay? Like, it's pretty scary. Okay. So free cash flow won't be certified until after,
The warrant prints.
which is this,
The warrant closes November 6th.
yeah,
And we won't know free cash until after that time. I don't have an exact date yet as to when they anticipate that coming back. We will have a number for you that we can share
Okay.
within the next 2 weeks, I would say.
Which is almost November 6th. Okay, right, we're about a week before. Okay, so
okay. All right, I'm wrapping my head around that one. What was I gonna say? Well, I guess for me, that means all the, in my mind, I'd like to start big picture. So like getting Don in to sort of organize like where we're at financially is sort of step number one. I don't mind starting to hear other stuff and start working through the process, because you guys know better than I do how long it takes to sort of get through some of these conversations. But I would be super helpful if I could get kind of grounded with some numbers. And if Don's available on Monday, I'd really welcome that conversation.
Sure. So I just sent Don a text. and he
Okay.
was
Let me,
responding.
let me clarify. I believe that we do have a solid number based on what the warrant said for cash available. That is what we can spend. It may change, it may go up by 2.5%, as you said, Corey, but there is a number. Is that number not correct?
no, this is for free cash, so
I
money
understand
left
that,
over.
but
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
not a free cash number. They actually put that in as a budget number.
Yeah, correct. That one is set. There's no question about
Okay,
that one's
all right,
okay.
good.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
All right. Yep.
well, it was more, and I bring it up, Ralph, because last time there was $300,000 of free cash that went into
That's right.
the stabilization fund. I just want to get a sense of if we should expect that, and if we should expect a carve out or other projects which are going to be pseudo prioritized this round for that free cash funding push forward to annual. So
Yeah, I understand. Yeah.
Cool.
Got it.
And Don just sent me a text back. He is available Monday evening and he'll be happy to join.
Yay.
So.
Yeah.
And Corey, we feel like we've given him enough of what it is we're looking for him to be prepared to talk about in that meeting.
yeah, I'll have another conversation with him. I don't feel like I'm saying anything out of turn, but he still watches our meetings. So he's a glutton for this, just like we are. So he's fully aware of kind of where we are in the process. I don't know if he's on tonight, but he does watch maybe on YouTube replay. So he's got a good sense of what we need and where we are.
So let me ask, since we're gonna get a, I guess, a level setting from Dawn at the beginning of the meeting, would you like to hear the executive session at the end of the meeting? Since you're gonna go through all the requests and then we'll go into executive session for the final request? Does that make more sense for the flow of the meeting?
I think so.
That's great.
Okay.
I've done it both ways. One request around the facilities for the alarm. I know there was an engineering study. Is there a way of sharing that on OneDrive just so that we can kind of see what I have no idea whether it's 50 pages or 100 pages, but at least being able to sort of scan the hopefully executive summary, that'd be super helpful.
Sure.
Work process.
Pretty good. And then, yeah, you had the two capital projects, but I think we're going to talk about those on Monday when people are ready, along with Don. So other thing for Don and just for everybody is if we're going to hear about the fire alarm system, then I'll be sure Don spends some time about the special stabilization funds and how they're unique in things, because that does change. You know, if we're going to approach the fire suppression thing differently, because instead of a stabilization fund, then we award these other requests. So just so we all understand why and where those things come from. I'll put that on.
Are you talking about the school stabilization fund with the
Yeah.
0.5 million? My understanding was
Correct.
that fund was set up largely as a way to save for larger projects like the roofs and not to be tapped for other intermediate.
That's completely correct. Yeah. So this would be, so there's roofs. The other big thing is the fire alarm system in the Cohasset middle high school is completely out of date and can't be done anymore. So we funded a feasibility study to kind of determine if we replace it or we run a new system in parallel. And basically with the understanding that as soon as that's done, we can execute, because we didn't spend that 1.5 million earlier. We only spent the money on the feasibility study. So that's a situation where if we're ready to go at special, we haven't spent the money yet, and this is something which is in progress and we are expecting. So we would more likely we'd be willing to spend it at special because we would have spent it at annual if we had known what the number was, but we just didn't because we hadn't done the research yet.
Gotcha. I didn't realize the fund when they appropriated the 1.5 also had, besides roofs, had the alarm in the consideration. Okay.
Yeah, there's a list of, we should get that list to you, Katie, and I'll try to, there's that list of like $9 million worth of stuff. It's quite terrifying. So, yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
the whole thing came down to what the policies were. When did you use that fund and when did you use the capital stabilization fund? So the policies were probably ought to be brought out again, so we take a look and see how we thought about it at the time. So, right.
Great point, Ralph. Great.
Just so I'm clear, when I had to do the special education stabilization fund for the schools, we set up mechanically the fund, but then we also wrote a policy of basically what the funding mechanism in was and what the funding mechanism out in terms of that. Was there a policy written for the school stabilization fund?
Yes, we have that. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I can get it over to you unless Michelle, if you have it handy. But I can get those things over to you. Katie, I'll do it, Michelle.
Well, should we just get those on the OneDrive, Corey?
Yes.
Sure,
Yeah,
we'll
they
look at them frequently throughout the session.
Yeah.
good point.
That'd be helpful. I mean, Chris is in the same boat as I am, in terms of just trying to get caught up on some of that stuff. Okay. Well, that's helpful that, you guys have a policy that we can use to sort of, make sure that we're administering that fund correctly.
So we spent entirely too much time on that document, so it'd be nice to use it.
Good.
Awesome. Well, I'll be looking forward to reading it.
I don't think there's anything else specifically on the agenda, except, actually, we wanted to talk a little bit. I know, Ralph, you had expressed in-person meetings versus Zoom meetings. So do you want to talk about that a little bit, about how you feel about that?
Yeah, there's a sense that when you're meeting in person, the interaction tends to be not only among us, which is really important, how we all relate to one another is very important for the collaboration of the committee as I see it. It's less stilted than the Zoom meetings, but also you tend to meet face to face with each of the department heads, whether it's the schools or the DPW or facilities. You're seeing people face to face and you have a very honest, frank discussion. Is less formal than this tends to be. So for many reasons, I felt once COVID was not an issue any longer, it was in our interest to return to what I felt was a much more collaborative and productive way to actually operate as a committee. Now, you can always do a hybrid meeting where, in fact, it's not possible all the time for everyone to be available. So the hybrid can work, but it is really quite desirable to be together and to and talk, quite frankly, with one another. It feels very good when you could do it. So,
Michelle, are we allowed to do hybrid under mass rules? I know it was.
You are.
Okay.
You are. As a matter of fact, if you meet in person, you have to have a hybrid option. That is one of the rules. And we have plenty of owls. I'm open to anything that you choose. If I can offer maybe a suggestion is that when you do go through those requests face to face, that's when you have your hybrid meetings. And then when you're just taking care of your regular business, maybe you meet on Zoom because it's a little easier. But
Well,
up to the committee.
one thing that I find disruptive, Ralph, you made really great points across the board about how the meeting experience goes. But I do worry that all of that falls apart when the committee's together, but the person who's presenting is remote, right? So is it realistic for us to, I don't want to say require, but at this point in time, request that committee heads or requestees show up in person, and then we have all our stuff, we have our laptops, we can kind of have that in-face discussion? Or is it realistic to expect that they'll mostly be remote? Because that's my thought is if we're all in person, I think companies the same way. If everyone's in person, great. Everyone's in the office, great. If everyone's remote, great. But if you try to kind of have if you kind of have a smorgasbord, it doesn't work as well.
in the past, prior to COVID, meeting department heads always came to the meetings. Of course, there was no such thing as remote at the time. You never even heard of Zoom. So it really was a very desirable way to actually have interaction. Now, you could do it differently now, and I tend to agree with you, Corey, that if in fact the presenter is remote and we're together, that is not a very satisfactory way. It should be, the presenter has to be, if we're going to be together, they need to present together with us. So
Right.
That's how I look at it. So I agree with the points you're making on this.
Yeah, one of the points that I have on, well, I guess in defense of doing the Zoom meetings is not having to carry our technical paraphernalia down to wherever we're meeting and get online to be able to have access to all the paperwork and documentation that will be on OneDrive. And I for one don't want to have to print it all out and bring it with me. So I personally like the Zoom environment. Maybe when we're deliberating over voting, we would want to meet in person, and then we wouldn't have to worry about the third party, presenter also being able to meet with us.
I like that idea. If we're going to hear things, we can do it virtually. And if we're going to kind of get into how we make this all work and we want to have more informal, to Ralph's points, we do that in person.
I would, having been on the presenter side and waited for significant times in the basement just to get on, I am very sensitive to town employees at night. And if we're running behind, having people like literally spending an extra time in their workday. So I like Zoom for presentations and getting the facts out. I'm totally happy to come in person and deliberate, as if we're going to do the hear it all and then deliberate. Let's hear it all via Zoom and then get together and deliberate in person. But again, I'm sensitive to the presenter piece of it, and getting people like Don who have other commitments and live far away, like I'd rather have access than necessarily insist on the in-person piece of it. So I think a mix of meetings might be the appropriate way to sort of split this.
I have kind of a natural inclination for personal meetings, so I would welcome the suggestion that we meet in person when appropriate. And I'd like to meet you all personally. You know, it's a
three
bad way to
dimensions.
meet. It's a bad way to meet people.
For all we know, you're like 3 doors away.
Okay, I'm actually in a hotel room in Frankfurt, Germany right
Okay,
now.
you're not close.
I'm not close.
Right. Are you gonna make the meeting? Right.
Oh, it's late for you over there.
It
Very
is,
late.
yeah. So a short meeting is good tonight
Yeah.
for one of our members.
Okay, well, do we want to ask Francine how she feels about it and then come to a conclusion on this, or do we feel we're ready to just decide how we want to operate?
I think let's roll with it, and if we can change something if there's a problem that pops up with Francine. This is kind of in line with typically what we've talked about previously, Susan. I can't imagine any issues, but
Okay.
I'd assume we roll with it.
All right. All right, so before we adjourn, I just wanted to go over the timeline with Michelle here as STM is looming. You mentioned 11/6 as the closing of the warrant. So we have a bit to get through. We have 3 meetings, maybe, 3 meetings in October, potentially, including tonight, and then possibly one more the week of the warrant closing.
Yes and no, because these requests will ultimately have to go to advisory and then be voted on by the select board as well as part of the warrant.
Sure.
So it's gonna be an accelerated STM request process. And I will go back to all the department heads and see if there's anything on this list for STM that can be removed and move it to annual town meeting. That'll make it a lighter lift, because we.
And please blame it on us, make it clear that we're the stubborn jerks in this scenario. So take it off a special if it doesn't belong there, get it off.
Yep.
So,
Great.
our recommendations do not need to necessarily be in the warrant if we in fact can't do it. They can also be on the floor of the meeting, so you can always.
But in the past, hasn't the select board generally preferred that capital's recommendations were in front of them before they voted? So
Correct.
I mean, you're right, Ralph, but the strong preference I've heard in the past from the select board has always been to have capital's recommendations before they vote. So if we don't vote, we're kind of forcing their hand to vote later in the process or vote without our recommendation.
And and meeting Monday kind of buys us a week since they meet Tuesday. So if they're November 6th close, that gives us to the 5th. The 4th is our kind of drop dead date, which is I'll probably be away the 4th, but we'll figure. It doesn't matter.
Or I think it's the week prior because you have to get to advisory as well. I think when you see these requests,
That's fine.
you won't be
All right,
alarmed.
so we have 2 weeks. We have 2 meetings, 20th, 27th, and then we're done. Okay, cool.
So basically, we have to be prepared to get through the request and vote by the 28th.
Correct.
Yes.
Okay.
Which makes all the more reason to have a heavier meeting next week to sort of get through the material first pass so that we can do a second pass on the 28th. Okay.
All right, just want everybody to be aware what our commitment.
Yeah.
is.
It always sneaks up. And Michelle, what is the date of the special town meeting? December 9th. Okay, I was gonna say a week earlier. Okay.
Okay. All right, then. I think that's all I have for tonight, and everybody get a lot of sleep because you're gonna get inundated.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right, Michelle, I'll just contact you about getting the agenda for the next meeting.
I'll pull together a draft agenda and send it off to you, so you just have something,
Okay.
and then you can make comments. I think that'll be easier for you.
All right, that sounds great.
And Michelle, if you've got that list where you have the liaisons on that spreadsheet, if that's in the OneDrive, that we can reference it. I'm guessing it's all going to be there, so just bring it up.
Sure.
I guess I'll prioritize accessing my OneDrive for tomorrow.
We all have homework.
Ready to go for the weekend.
And
Awesome.
All right. I'll make a motion to adjourn then, Susan, if we're ready.
yes, that'd be great.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call. Chris?
I agree, whatever
Adjournment.
voted, I
Adjourn.
agree.
Close the meeting. Go
Adjourn.
home.
Sorry, adjourn.
Ralph?
Ralph Jones or I?
Katie Dugan, aye.
Corey Evans, aye.
And Franklin, I. All right, everyone.
Thank you.
Good
Good
night.
night.
Thank you. Good
All
night.
right.
Thansee everybody.
Night. Nice to meet you.
See
Chris.
everyone.